So, Samantha, you see, that's a pretty important concept, isn't it? You bet. You bet. That could change the quality of your life. Don't you agree? Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It's not about having, $10,000 to start today. It's about saving what you can and doing that over time and getting the best interest rate. So we start with where we're at. And before you know it, one day your money will be out earning you rather than you out earning money. And so that's a great place to be. So, Samantha, the $1 million question at this point is, where can I get that kind of rate of return? That's a very valid question. But protect the principal that I have, and where I would actually be guaranteed not to lose my money. Where can we do that? So what I'm going to do is have you help me figure that out. There are three primary strategies that can be used, and so let me just kind of draw them out here on this paper for you. The first one we're going to talk about is this fixed category. Now, this is where we talked about CDs, banks, money markets, things like that. Right now, would you agree that it's 0 to 2%? Yeah, it's pretty discouraging when I get my checking account statement and I've earned 6 cents. It's like, really? Stock market is the third column here, and option. Now, what have we typically heard about the stock market? You make all kinds of money. The higher the risk, the higher return, those kind of things. Well, you make money, but you can also what? Lose money. That's right. Lose big time in some cases, and risk what? The principal, the money you start with. And that's what we said that we really need to protect. That's an asset and you want to protect it. So here in this middle column, option number 2, I'm going to call it the indexed. That strategy is where your principal, the money you start with, is protected. Your interest being earned is protected. So principal being protected plus interest earned being protected equals guarantee. Do you like guarantees, Samantha? I do, especially when it comes to my money. I like guarantees. So you do not lose money. That's the really most important thing we're going to talk about, and I'll illustrate that some more. You do not lose money in the index strategy. So out of these three, Samantha, which do you believe fits your personality, your style of investing? Which would these make more sense for you? Right, the indexed. That's what most people would select, Samantha, when they understand that concept. So let me tell you how that works a little bit more. You've heard of the S&P index, right? Well, the Standard & Poor, or S&P 500, is the stock index that measures 500 of the most widely held companies in the United States. They represent over 100 interest groups. You're talking health, technology, commodities, and so on. Those can be represented as groups within that. In fact, the S&P 500 almost represents 70% of the American economy. So that's a significant thing. But get this, the S&P has averaged almost 10% a year for the last 25 years. And so if you had invested at the S&P 25 years ago, would you be happy with that right now? Yeah, you would. That would be a good thing. In fact, given our example, you'd have $640,000. So with that said, what would you be doing right now? What trip would you go on first? Okay, sounds awesome. Isn't it fun to dream? Now, when we get back together, Samantha, if we have determined that an index strategy is suitable for you, I'll then explain the specific products and terms and conditions and more details that are involved in it. But for now, let me give you an overview of the index strategy and how the interest crediting works. So what I'm going to do is just draw that out here. Let me get another piece of paper. And all interest in an index strategy earned is linked to the S&P 500 up to a cap. For example, let's say it's a 5% cap, but without the downside risk of the market. So in other words, Samantha, would you at this point rather have all of the market gain, which might be 10% in a given year, but also all the market risk? So I'm going to illustrate this just a little bit more to help you answer that question. Your money protected from a market loss at the same time you participate in the growth of the S&P up to a cap is an index strategy. So for example, to illustrate this, let's say that I have $10,000 today. Now, at the end of year one, the market gives me 10%, so now I have $11,000. At the end of year two, I get another 10%. I'm liking this. Now I've got $12,100. But hold on, third year, the market loses 20%. That's not good. Guess what happens? I go all the way back down to $9,680. Does that make you happy? Nah. Let's look at what would happen if this were an index strategy as opposed to being directly in the market. So let's take that same 10,000. This time, Samantha, at the end of year one, we get the same 10%. So we're both at 11,000. Year two, we get the same 10%. We're at 12,100, just like the other. But now when the 20% loss comes, what happens over here? What's your balance at the end of year three? Awesome. It's 12,100. You did not have any losses. Now, isn't that wonderful? Did you ever think you'd be so happy to see a zero? Zeros are heroes in this case because sitting over here in the market, I've got $9,680. I have to make 25% the next year, and can you guess for me what that would put my money back up to? Right, 12,100. Now, over here on my index strategy, let's say I only gain 12% of the market gain that year instead of 25. That number, I'm going to do the math for you, is $13,552. So, can you see the difference in what the value of zero risk, of not having to take the loss from the market is? At the end of that fourth year, we have substantially more in the index strategy than we had by being directly in the market. So zeros are important and an awesome way to beat the inflation through the fact that we're not taking a market loss and we're participating in the market gain up to a cap.